Of the Raiders in the open of our power rankings. Certainly a team that we are going to get to. We are down a man, but not for long, Cynthia, as our prime purveyor of all of our predictive analytics is to my left. Dan Hanzus is over in London, so you will hear from him in just a moment. The Around the NFL crew spending a week over there ahead of the second game in our NFL's International Series. Power Rankings is presented by Energizer, the long-lasting power of Energizer. Still going, so Cynthia, we will likely provide a lot of the analysis surrounding Dan's picks this week following a fifth week of games. But why don't we get started by getting a look here at the 1 through 8. And I'm sure you're not surprised at all to see the Patriots at number 1.
Zero surprise there.
Maybe a little surprised to see the Saints having jumped the Chiefs, each team with a single loss. But why don't we get it from the author himself, as he, again, is over in London and will explain the reason why he has these teams ordered 1 through 8. Here's Dan Hanzus.
Power Rankings friends, Dan Hanzus here at beautiful Tottenham Hotspur Stadium, the site of Panthers-Bucks. On Sunday, the Around the NFL podcast gang. We're really excited. We're going to be doing a live show. We're going to be doing all sorts of run-up work leading to Sunday, getting in touch with our UK fan base, which is really rabid, and we're so excited to be here. But who cares about all that? Let's talk about the power rankings from Dan Hanzus of NFL.com. We'll start with the top 8 teams. I got Patriots at 1, and they're not moving anytime soon. The Saints move into number 2 after another dominant showing. I got the Chiefs falling to number 3 after their Sunday loss. The Niners now 4-0, spank the Browns. That moves them up to the top 5. They're at number 4. The Packers at 5, Eagles at 6. Seahawks after that great Thursday night win. Russell Wilson playing like an MVP at 7. And the Dallas Cowboys coming at 8. They are a little hard to figure out right now at 3-2. Looked awesome in their first 3 games. Last 2 games, two games not so hot. I don't know. What do you guys think?
Well, here's what I think, Cynthia, before we get to analyzing. One, Dan clearly has set his priorities over London as such. Pub crawl, probably like Tower of London, Tower Bridge.
Tourist activities.
And then power rankings is what my suggestion, or perhaps just personal hygiene. If you got enough time to do the hair, Dan, maybe put on a darn dress shirt or something, because I was distracted by his Oasis tee. But to the analysis. And because he's not here to defend himself, guess what? I don't care.
Listen, it must be nice to be able to do this show abroad.
So, right?
I mean,
exactly.
I'm here in California. You are too. We managed to come to work, just saying.
So let's start with the Chiefs. He drops them a spot. I'm wondering whether or not we could make a case that they should drop further. They didn't look great in Detroit, needed that 2-minute drill to get the win, and no touchdowns for Pat Mahomes. And now for the second consecutive week, we see a defense manage to slow this offensive attack down.
Well, I don't know if the defense slowed them down as much as, injuries kind of slowed them down, right? Patrick Mahomes hurting himself and his own O-lineman.
That'll do it.
Tons of pressure. It was kind of a strange game, but this is what happens in the middle of the season. So in my opinion, and the way that I look at it, which is a little different than the way that Dan looks at it, I think it's fine. I'll tell you where I have them later, but
no, don't.
Fine.
Don't even acknowledge it.
I won't
We're
even
going to tease
acknowledge
that
it.
in like 5 minutes.
Perfect. But ultimately here, it's like this is part of the grind of the season, right? I'm a little less concerned about it. The defense does look bad. They're getting some pieces back. Tyreek Hill probable to come back this week so far, as of what we know today on Wednesday. But I think it's okay.
Could you make a compelling case if you were pressed? And I say, hey, you're taking the side of the 49ers.
Yep.
Based on their competition thus far and based on what you've seen, could you make a case that they should be the number 3 team since they have not lost and you can only play the teams on your schedule?
I could make a compelling case because some of the most predictive things in the National Football League in terms of to get wins are defensive pressures and rushing. 2 things that they've done really, really well. That's like the formula for wins. Like something like 65% of teams that have at least 5 percentage points more pressure than their opponents win games over the course of 10 seasons. And they've been crushing that defensive pressure this whole season long. You're right. You can't control your schedule. But what you can control is your ability to rush. And we now see that kind of Kyle Shanahan, outside zone rushing team, like really came together against the Browns. So I could make the case that the San Francisco 49ers should be higher.
And again, you can only play the teams on your schedule. The Browns, all season, wins or losses, have been noted for the poor performance of their offensive line. So, I guess you have to some degree, put that defensive line's performance in context against the competition they're facing, and it'll hash itself out. For all the 49er fans that are upset, they have an undefeated team that is behind 2 one-loss teams. Hey, there's still plenty of time left.
There's plenty, and they haven't even played their division yet.
That's
part of the reason of like making the playoffs is like getting to the playoffs. And this is the Rams and the Seahawks are really all viable, and the 49ers all very viable to make a deep run in the playoffs.
Yeah, I mean, it is a heck of a division that is likely going to be determined, as it should be, by those 2 games in division, I should say, between each opponent. The Cowboys. Do they belong at 8 after dominating bad teams and not playing well against good teams?
I think Dan was on like the wrong time zone when he did this, because I don't think that they belong number 8. I think they should have dropped down a little bit further. What we've seen in the past 2 games is like very concerning for a couple of reasons. One, this Dak Prescott, like when we saw the first 3 games of the season against defenses that were not ranked very high, that aren't very good, great, he looked awesome, but that's kind of what you're supposed to do. Now we've seen tough games against more stingy defenses, and these are some concerning issues. Like play action is not working for them. That's where interceptions has been coming. So these are the things that I don't know who the Cowboys are necessarily. And by the way, their defensive front was super undisciplined this past game. They were not making tackles. Leighton Vander Esch got crushed. Like these are people who don't usually get crushed. Like what's going on with that defense?
So
can you answer that?
That's why we get a look here that works perfectly with our next board, which is teams 9 through 16, and trying to make a case that one of these teams should have jumped the Cowboys. I can see one at number 9 that I would have put ahead of them based on that close loss and a missed field goal from someone who is normally automatic from 44 yards, and likely would have had them at number 8. So let's get to Dan's explanation of teams 9 through 16. Back to London.
All right, I'm back, and now it's time to dig into teams 9 through 16 as I refer to my notes. The Rams, I got them in the top 10 still, even after a loss. I actually liked what I saw on Thursday night. Sometimes the kicker's got to make a kick. Greg Zuerlein couldn't do it. The Bills at 10, that defense is for real. Not sure about the offense at this stage still. The Bears fall to 11. The Texans at 12 is the team I'm excited about right now. I think their ceiling is as high as anybody in the AFC, and they seem to be a looming superpower that could really put up a fight against the Pats and Chiefs. Rounding out the rest of the list, the Lions at 13 coming off the bye. The Colts move up to 14 after that great win on Sunday. Panthers at 15, and the Vikings, who really had a rough week but took care of business against the Giants. I got them at number 16, right in the middle of the pack. Nobody can get mad at me because I don't have them too high or too low. That's how you do the power rankings.
All right, thank you, Dan. Again, distracted by your perfectly placed T-shirt
logo
goes, and how far unzipped the hoodie is, just to make sure you see enough.
I like that he's like, and that's how you do power rankings. Not too high, not too low.
The tutorial there. So let's start with those Bears. Down 6 spots after a loss in London. Some teams are okay going over there. Some teams aren't. I'm not saying that's why they won or they lost. They did have a lead. It seemed like they were getting ready to pull away from the Raiders, and it might end up kind of breaking their way. But the defense just did not show up.
You know, it's really funny because the Bears traveled like really last minute to get to London, whereas the Raiders spent the entire week there practicing together. I don't know if it's like a time zone thing as much as it is a let's have a lot more focused practice in an area where we're all like doing these bonding things together. That does seem to have some effect. We saw it with the Saints going up to the Seahawks. We've seen it with West Coast travel before. It kind of seems like those extra weeks where you're in a conference room all together and really having strong weeks of practice, like that does tend to make the difference. The Bears offense was very confusing. This game could have gone either way. They still were in it very late in the game. This, I don't know, 6 spots, that's a dicey one. But the biggest factor in this one for me, and the biggest the change for me, was they lost a game they were supposed to win, and the Packers won a game that they weren't supposed to win. So that makes a huge shift, right? So
yeah, and I guess the one thing, and not to get into tiebreakers after week 5, but if you want to give the Bears a pass, you want to lose to an AFC team, because after your head-to-head, your next wild card tiebreaker is conference or division or record in conference. There we go. So they lose to an AFC team, better than the Packers losing to the Cowboys in the NFC. So maybe that's where they catch a break. But it was just odd to see that defense not really play up to the level that we would expect.
Khalil Mack didn't even have 1 sack.
Right.
Not even 1 sack.
And the thing is, you know, with that offense and what you just said, kind of the head-scratching sort of approach on offense, the defense has to be dominant for them to win games. You know, that side of the ball can't just be average. It has to be dominant for them to win.
Perfect.
So, you know, I'm thinking they're maybe a little bit high. What about the and this is a perfect lead-in because the Texans are right behind them. I feel better about the Texans right now than I do the Bears, specifically Deshaun Watson and what he's been able to do.
The funny part about the Texans is you feel like their ceiling is incredibly high, but you also feel like their floor is low. They're like a volatile stock for me, right? It can go really well, just like you're seeing there with especially like Will Fuller. How many touchdowns did he have this past week?
Day.
3. So ultimately, they have all these options on offense are coming together, but some of the things that are like the fundamentals, and my stock analogy here is maybe going a little too far, but some of the fundamentals to trade on, like O-line, are still very poor. Even though they're getting like this Carlos Hyde, Duke Johnson Jr. to like figure out their run game enough to like get past it. If you run up against a buzzsaw like the Patriots or, any of these defenses, then that can be a problem. But I do agree, like it's boom or bust for that team.
Right. And I would just say, as far as that offensive line goes, it's better. Obviously, since
Still
they acquired
not good.
Tunsil, but you have 2 rookies, Sharping and Howard, who did look good against the Chargers, who didn't look good against the Panthers, but did look good this past week against the Falcons. So I think, with young players, you're still trying to figure it out.
Right.
I do like it a lot better than what they had going before with
100%.
Henderson and that. So
100%.
You're kind of, hey, it's a futures bet. There we go. Exactly.
we love
with
the
the stock
market
analogy,
here.
we'll keep it going. All right. What about the Panthers? We mentioned the Panthers. They knock off the Texans, and in a heck of a battle for 2 teams celebrating their 25th anniversary. It was a bit of a ceremonial game, a lot of pomp and circumstance around it. They end up getting a win over a very hot Jaguars team.
Yeah, look, the Panthers are confusing too. If Christian McCaffrey works, they work. If Christian McCaffrey doesn't work, they don't work. It's kind of they go by way of him. So for me, that's a nice thing because he's a great piece. But the problem is that's not enough to be a really strong. Like 15 is probably about right for them because they can beat. It kind of just depends on, like I said, if Christian McCaffrey works or not, right? Because their defensive front has been able to get much pressure, but the back end and those there's some of their safety play and their corner play has been dicey.
Which is interesting because Deshaun Watson has torn the league apart and secondaries apart by extending plays, and for whatever reason, that front was able to get enough pressure on him that he wasn't able to do
Brian
that.
Burns, good rookie.
I guess the big thing about the Panthers is you just have to ask yourself, because I don't think anybody feels like they're going to win the division, that the Saints, as Drew Brees gets closer and closer to returning, is going to win that division. So do you see them winning one of those 2 wild card spots ahead of the Rams, Seahawks, 49ers, Packers, Vikings, Bears? I mean,
or
that's
like anyone in
what
the
you're talking about.
Right, yeah.
So Eagles, that's kind of what the reality is of them moving forward if they can't win that division.
I think the Bucs being better than expected has had a big shift on the Panthers' potential to make the playoffs.
Right.
Like these one little onesie-twosie games between the division here and there that are all at the end of the season, those are a big deal. I mean, this game this weekend between the Bucs and the Panthers, where they're there for, that is going to be a big decider for if the Panthers have a chance.
So if Dan or Cynthia were able to make it work perfectly where you have 8 AFC and 8 NFC teams in the top 16, that would be what you suspect the playoffs are going to look like. That is not the case. So we will get outside of that top 16 when we return. The Browns have been a peak and valley team all season. We'll get into what valley they hit next.
Hey, we know one thing, right? We know one emotion we aren't feeling right now. Shock.
Had a tough loss, right, this week for the Cardinals family, all right? So I knew we were going to get this one done for you and your family. Congratulations. Means the world to us.
Game ball. Tony Jefferson.
We waited a little longer than we wanted to, but a hell of a win. And I don't have a disco, but let's all start dancing. I say this, man. I'm 56 years old. That's the most fun I've ever had tonight, man.
All right, so here we go. A look at 17 through 24. That is a long flight back to Oakland that certainly the Raiders felt pretty darn good about, knocking off a very good Bears team and slowing down that Bears defense. You see them there at number 19. The Browns slide all the way to 21 after getting wrecked on Monday Night Football in primetime by the 49ers. Let's get to the explanation of how they arrived at this order, and by they I mean Dan Hanzus. Here he is in London.
All right, time for 17 to 24 in the power rankings. This is what I like to call purgatory. Teams either I can't figure out or I ding them a little bit for failing me and letting me down when I thought they were better. The Ravens, perfect example at 17. Yes, they got the win against the Steelers, but Lamar Jackson, 3 interceptions. I don't know if I trust them right now. The Chargers, Matt Money Smith, what's going on with the Chargers? They look a little shaky right now. I got them down to 18. The Raiders at 19 after a great win in London here, had to move them up, and they're going to have a great bye and do their disco dancing. The Jaguars, the Browns. Oh, the Browns. What happened? Titans and the Giants at 23, rounding out that grouping.
All right, Dan, so let's get started as we get to Power Moves presented by Energizer. Still going, Cynthia. Let's start with the Raiders. Because you can make a point, or you can't make it. It's not making the point. It's pointing out over the last 2 weeks against a good front in Indianapolis and a great front against the Bears, this offensive line and signing Trent Brown in the offseason is starting to coalesce, is starting to come together, and looks like one of the better units in the league.
I don't know if I'd go that far.
Okay.
I mean, I think that
they look great in London.
They looked great. You're right. The thing that was interesting about most of it is you have an advantage. Like the early turnovers make an entire game script look a little different, right? When you're playing.
But they were down late, and that offensive line, specifically Colton Miller, who has not played well, played fantastic.
Colton Miller had a very great game, yes. And they figured out a great strategy to create the best options for that. I'm like
You're not sold.
I'm an O-line, like that's my thing, right?
Sure.
I've spent a lot of time measuring O-lines, so I said they looked great. I don't call them great yet.
I think you could probably make a case as if this continues, Trent Brown might end up being the signing of the offseason. As much money as they paid him, moving him to the right side, if this holds, specifically what we've seen these last 2 weeks against very good fronts, that is such a big.
Like literally, if he can hold it up.
You don't want him to hold.
No, not holding, but if he holds up, right.
So the Raiders move up to 19. I'd probably have them just a little bit higher based on against the Bears in London, in Indianapolis, one at Denver. Having won those 3 games on the road, I think should carry a little bit of weight for sure. The other interesting spot was the Chargers. They slip. It's probably the worst game I've seen from Phillip Rivers, and I've seen them all the last 3 years. It was just a weird game, I think. You see that right there? I mean, just short-arming Keenan on a skinny post who was wide open and maybe had a gate to the end zone.
Yeah.
The offensive line actually, despite that play, was not that bad. Here, he doesn't even see a defender that was just squatting, following his eyes to jump that route for the interception. That should have been an interception that was dropped. And I guess you just kind of got to ask, as this one sails on him for a pick, is it an anomaly? Is it an anomaly? And I would say yeah, because the first 4 games were really good from Phillip Rivers.
That was watching that game. I was
dumbfounded.
I was like, what am I even watching here? So I'm not sure what was going on there. We'll give them the mulligan for that. I think maybe the AFC West is really interesting. I mean, if the Chiefs don't look like themselves going forward, there's
Right.
an opportunity for, the Chargers and the Raiders to gain some speed here. I mean, even the Broncos to gain some speed, not necessarily make the playoffs, but jump the power rankings at least.
Yeah, and I guess if you want to kind of look forward to next week in power rankings, they'll play the Steelers this week. Obviously, serious situations at quarterback, injuries all over that roster, much like the Chargers. And I guess that's the one question is, did we maybe discount the injuries too much for this Charger team? Last year, they didn't have Bosa for the first 10 games or the 9 games. They go 7-2, and it's like, you know what? They'll overcome it. There are so many guys hurt on this roster that it's probably a lot for them to overcome at this point.
Starting 2 safeties in the beginning of the season, basically gone, and then Melvin Ingram, when's he coming back?
Right. Could he come back
Right?
this week? They lost their left tackle. They lost, as you mentioned, 2 safeties, a cornerback, wide receivers. I mean, it's really been. Melvin Gordon was trying to get work back in.
Wait, so he comes back? That doesn't help.
And it didn't
Does he
look
play
well.
safety? What are we going to do?
So let's get to the Browns. And this isn't injury-based. This is just up and down performance. And it's hard to make sense of what the Browns are week in and week out.
I think the best thing that I saw about the Browns was the fact that at the same time that their O-line is looking very porous, their defense is allowing the most yards per play. That kind of tells you everything. So your offense can't get it going and your defense is getting gashed. Like, you're going to find yourself in more situations where Baker Mayfield's being asked to do just this, and then see what happens. The defender comes and steals
You see
the
what
ball.
happens? You see what happens?
You see what happens, but ultimately, those two things don't fit together, right? If you're going to have a problem on one side, you better be awesome at the other side so that you can kind of make up the difference, right?
Yeah.
But if you don't, then you see what happens on Monday. I mean, look, they came out of the gate. They were down behind it. Turnovers cost them just so much.
And look at those next 3, Cynthia. I mean, right there on the screen. Seattle at home, at New England, at Denver. The
I will
interesting
say,
thing, though, yeah, go ahead, because
after
I know
that-
where you're going.
After that, things get real nice
They
for
still
them.
have 2 with Cincinnati. They still have 2
Arizona.
with the Steelers. They have Arizona, but just specifically in division, you saw
Kareem Hunt comes back.
You heard what Dan Hansus said about the Ravens and why he has them all the way down at 17.
Okay, so
3 interceptions against the Steelers, and they had to go to overtime to go up against an undrafted 4th-string quarterback out of Samford and the Wildcat. And you could make a case they should have got out of there.
Pretty hard to defend.
I mean, they probably should have lost that game. I mean, kind of the way it shook out there at the end. So,
you don't think like a kick just like at the very last second?
Oh, I'm just thinking of that ridiculous personal foul penalty
Yes.
that gave them new life to tie that game up in the first place. So it's I understand why the Ravens are dinged,
But
and I
they're the
understand
first
why
in that division at number 17.
They are.
That's hilarious. Like, you have to make the playoffs somehow. So I guess they're the ones going to the playoffs at number 17.
Again, before you
Yikes.
get too down on the Browns, and I know that rhymed, remember, 2 against Cincinnati, 2 against the Steelers, Arizona. That is 5 of the games left on their schedule.
Still happy in Browns.
And they already beat the Ravens once. So,
Yeah.
and they did it at their place, beat them at home. You win the tiebreaker, and maybe that's how you get out of division at 8-8 and somehow make the playoffs. We're going to come back with your Power 5, your Freeland 5, which is 5 teams
Like the
that
right
you have
ones.
projected to win
Dan's
the Super
not here.
Bowl.
These are the right ones.
That's what we do when we return. Back on Power Rankings, presented by Energizer, still going here. You see the top 8. Address those a little bit earlier in the show. Patriots, no surprise, still undefeated at the top, followed by the Saints. Chiefs, who got their first loss handed to them. As we get to Freeland's Power 5. And Cynthia, these are your 5 teams, according to your model, that you believe have the best chance to win the Super Bowl. Number's still low because there's a lot of season left.
Absolutely. And you remember, you have to get to the playoffs in order to contend for the Super Bowl, in order to be in this Super Bowl projection to begin with. So this is far more forward-looking than just a snapshot of Week 6.
So let's look forward with the Packers. You have them slotted there at number 4, coming off an impressive road win that, by the way, we previewed last week, pointing out that Aaron Rodgers, for whatever reason, has always played extremely well, and so well in AT&T Stadium that he's never lost there, and he put on a clinic again.
Yeah, when you look at the Packers, it's their defensive improvements, because we kind of knew Aaron Rodgers was great, right? The ad-libbing, the ability to create off the run, like just the crazy stuff. By the way, I was looking, when he runs to the right, like his passer rating like is ridiculous, like 150 something over the past since the beginning of last season. Crazy. Right. So when you look at that and then you see the improvement that they've made on defense, that has made such a significant difference in their Super Bowl projections, because remember, it's kind of this combination of how good's your quarterback, defensive pressure specifically, and then running. That's kind of like the secret sauce for Super Bowl projections. So that's part of what you're seeing in this, because that's kind of the same thing that, you know, the Patriots have. They have this dominant defense, especially with pressures. Nobody has more sacks than the Pats. And then they have great quarterback play and then the ability to run the ball. That's kind of the most probable formula.
And also, you said it right there at the top, and it is, in order to win the Super Bowl, you have to make the playoffs first. So you have a team that has already defeated 2 other teams in their division, have a crack at the Lions this week. They could go 3-0 in division, and have one of the best records in their, or tied for the best record in their conference, meaning you get a bye in the first week. You don't have to worry about a wild card team. You're only playing 2 playoff games instead of 1 because you're a division winner. And that goes, I would assume, is a big part of that.
Having the extra bye, so the first week of the playoffs off, is like a gigantic factor. Only playing, you know, the fewer games you have to play, the better chances that you have to win the Super Bowl.
Get out of that wild card round.
Get out of the wild card round.
Increases your chances dramatically. Unlike baseball, where it really doesn't matter if you're a wild card or division winner. All right, let's get to the bottom quadrant here. The final 8 teams. Broncos finally get off the schneid. They get a road victory in division, no less, against the Chargers. See if that is the start of something that gets them going in the right direction, having lost 2 games on game-winning field goals as the clock struck 0. The Cardinals get their first win, and then, of course, you see all the offers there at the bottom. Bengals, Jets, Redskins, Dolphins. Here's Dan with his explanation.
To get to the saddest part of the power rankings, 25, I got the Broncos, who finally get a win, but it's too little too late. The Steelers lose another quarterback, and the guy that's replacing him, his nickname is Duck. That doesn't sound promising for some reason. Falcons, Cardinals, Bengals, Jets, Redskins, and the Dolphins. Good news, on a bye they didn't lose, but they cannot move up in the power rankings. That's what I got this week. Now it's time to do some England stuff.
Wow, what a walk-off. Talk about a man that can really act. And by the way, Around the NFL guys in London all week getting ready for that Sunday
England
game.
Stuff?
England stuff? I don't know. Tea,
pub crawl,
crumpets,
Oasis
fish,
t-shirt,
chips.
zip up Oasis t-shirt.
The Eye, yeah, maybe go see some. Well, Oasis isn't together anymore. I guess they kind of are.
No,
but
you got to go buy a vintage t-shirt, right?
Yeah, I guess, I don't know, all that sort of stuff. England stuff. I think that was perfectly put.
Abbey Road.
Let's start. Oh no, they did that last time. Don't do that again. Let's start with the top of the bottom, and that is, can the Broncos get back on track? You see their schedule here. Always a tough place to play at Mile High. Titans and Chiefs at home, followed by the Colts on the road. Do you think it's more likely that they're getting back into this, or that it's more likely that we could see a sell-off?
Sell-off.
Yeah.
Unfortunately. I mean, the Titans game, that one's going to be an interesting one. I've modeled that one out. It's a very, very tight game so far this week. Chiefs, obviously, we got to see what happens with the Chiefs, because the Broncos offense has been playing a lot better. It hasn't really been Joe Flacco that's been the problem. And they have great pieces on this defense, still a lot of great players. And then the Colts O-line scares me against their defense, because they are missing one of their key pass rushers. So at Colts, that's a harder value proposition when you don't have Bradley Chubb.
Right. It's interesting because you look at the game against the Jaguars, and you think about 220 rushing yards for Leonard Fournette, so important to pay close attention. Kareem Jackson did not play in that game. He came back against the Chargers, and what did they rush for? 35. And he made like 14 tackles, filling the hole,
Huge
wrapping,
difference.
tackling, a massive difference for them. So even though Bradley Chubb was out, they got probably the most important piece of their run defense back.
Run
A
defense,
10-year
though.
veteran,
But when you're
and-
saying pass defense, though, like that's really scary. Like
yes,
no
their
Bradley
second
Chubb.
corner's been a big issue.
Right.
No question about it. All right, we'll get social when we return. Lean on your, I guess, whatever you have made of Dan's top 32
got
and
it.
how it all shook out. And I guess we're expected to answer for him. So
Oh, great.
Yeah, good luck
Just
with that.
Like always,
I'm
you
gonna
know,
make
just
you do
pulling
it.
his weight here.
Nice.
Got it.
On Power Rankings presented by Energizer, still going. Get up and game on. It is your NFL wake-up call from London, and it all starts with an NFC South rivalry. Panthers Bucks live from London with Rich Eisen and the Game Day Morning crew on the call. Panthers Bucks Sunday 9:30 Eastern, only on NFL Network. And that brings us to one final check-in over there in London. This time our Dan Hanzus has been joined by some friends.
He has friends?
Good point.
From London, we're really excited. We got the whole group here, all the heroes. What do we got coming up, Greg?
I mean, this is one of my career highlights, being on with you guys on the Power Ranking Show, but another one's going to be our Friday night show. We sold tickets. We did it a year ago. It's in a bigger venue, the Curtain Club, like all of our favorite fans out here.
I look at that show as I will operate as a star vehicle.
We usually do.
What,
That's just-
for you?
Yeah, no,
It's
you
the Sessler Show.
come along, but it's just where I sort of unfold my wares.
Gross. Yes, we will have that going on, and then on Sunday we're going to be all day at Tottenham Hotspur Stadium watching the Bucks and the Panthers, and be covering that, and then we're going to tape our flagship show Sunday night. A long day, but a lot of fun stuff as we look ahead to our second time through here in London.
And then we give you like unnecessary feedback on your Power Rankings as the games are ending Sunday night.
That's the fun part for me. So that's it from here in London. Now back to you in the States, as they say.
Thank you, Dan, Greg, Wes, and Seth. Appreciate that. Of course, over there, pay attention to all the stuff that the folks over there at Around the NFL are doing. A good week. All right, here we go. Power to the people. I'm going to make you answer for these, Cynthia.
Great.
So, Vikings at 16, lower than the Panthers. Confused look. Agree, disagree?
I mean, I think Dan's right on this one.
You'd have the
I saw
Vikings
it on
and the
Da-
Panthers.
Yeah.
I think we're just kind of betting on the Vikings figuring it out. from a talent perspective
Like
on
defense.
paper, that's exact. Defense is great. Maybe they'll sort this thing
Look
out
at
with
those
Diggs, Thielen,
receivers.
and
They've got
right.
Dalvin Cook.
If you're going to lean on somebody figuring it out after 4 or 5 weeks, I think you
And
probably
is
feel
Cam
better.
coming back?
Exactly, about the Vikings. So I'm with you. I'm all right
All
with
right,
that.
good, okay.
Why the hell the Eagles are ahead of the Seahawks in the power rankings? Fair point. They beat their best competition maybe in the division, head-to-head, the Seahawks did. Do you agree, disagree? Should the Seahawks be ahead of the Eagles?
No, I don't think the Seahawks should be ahead of the Eagles. They played the Rams once. They still have to play them again. It was a kick in the last minute.
That should have been made.
That should have been made. And
by should, we mean percentages that Greg
Correct.
Zuerlein makes those kicks suggest that he
super
should have
high.
made that kick.
It was a low probability thing that he wouldn't make it from
Right.
that distance based on his pass. But I understand that, like, if we're talking just snapshot for right now, I do understand.
Actually,
the
you know what? With the Cowboys looking the way they look, no. You feel better about the Eagles
Exactly.
winning
What he said.
the NFC
What he
East.
said.
There we go. Dan,
Perfect.
Exactly. Way to go, Dan. All right,
Exactly.
let's get one more in here. Gosh, why are we supporting Dan so much? Lions still behind the Bears. I know this is going to be tough for you as a Detroit native who has experienced many a heartbreak over the
all
Lions,
the heartbreaks.
your hometown
all of
team
the
growing
heartbreaks.
up.
Yeah. Yes. The Lions, look, they got to.
I'd put the Lions ahead of the Bears.
I wouldn't.
You would not.
I think it's gotten better this year. But no,
Okay.
I
Well
wouldn't.
said.
No.
Well said.
No.
There we go. All right, that is going to do it for us. A big thank you to Dan Hansers, the Around the NFL crew, from joining us over there in London. Remember,
Taking
check
time
out
out of
everything.
his busy London things
Right,
or
exactly.
England
His
things
English
schedule.
things. England things. Enjoy that. Thanks for tuning in. We certainly appreciate it. And thanks to Energizer. Still going.
Still
Although
going.
we're done.
No.
But they're still
I'm going to take Dan.